Hey class, chapter two. It's all about the strategic management process. And again, this, along with chapter one, which we just completed, chapter two is still kind of introductory material as it relates to HR management. The first couple of pages in the chapter talk about what is strategic management. The best way to think about strategic HR management, they're planned behaviors. It's a planned process that allows us to achieve the goals of the organization, no matter what that is. And there's really two distinct types of strategic management within HR. There's the formulation and implementation. Those are really the two main topics that I want you to know. And again, the chapter does kind of a good job of going through the different aspects of formulation and implementation. And actually, I have it right here. If you have page 78 of your book, it'll look just like this. Make sure you can take a look at it real quick. This is one of my favorite charts in the entire book. And the reason I love it so much is because it really does a good job of laying out the different aspects of strategy formulation, which is all about a SWOT analysis, which we'll talk about here in a second. And how can we analyze ourselves? How do we formulate? How do we develop the strategy that we're looking to obtain? And then implementation is taking everything that make up HR that we kind of talked about in chapter one and making it work. How do we bring about our own capabilities? How do we create performance? Things along those lines. So again, those are the two biggest things that I want you to take away from chapter two: our strategy formulation and strategy implementation, and what do each one of them look like specifically. So now, as far as formulation, the book spends a lot of time talking about a SWOT analysis, SWOT, and I'm sure you've probably been exposed to that before. About it, it's an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And again, this is very relevant for HR, and HR managers engage in this process all the time. I know I've engaged in it several times myself. First off, what are our strengths? What does our HR department do well? Whether that's recruitment, or do we treat people well? Do we pay good salaries? Do we provide good benefits? What do we pride ourselves on? What are the people who want to come work for us? What do they love about us? Those are the strengths that we have. By the same token, what are the weaknesses? Maybe we pay too low. Maybe we don't offer benefits. Maybe we people leave the organization because they have no chance of promotion. They have no chance of getting forward in the organization, or they have to work too many hours. So what are the weaknesses that we have? And then the other two, opportunities and threats. What opportunities do we have? Are we in a growing market? Are we part of a company where there's an endless supply of talent in the workplace? So how do we bring that talent in? How can we, maybe raise our salaries to provide opportunities for not just future, employee, growth, but how do we attract people? So, what opportunities do we have? And then finally, what threats are we focused on? Are there other competitors in the workplace that really, people are going over to different companies because they offer different pay and better benefits and things like that? Are we looking at, like right now in our society, inflation is really high. So, is inflation, hurting us? With the rise of remote work, because of COVID, a lot of companies are struggling to get people into the workplace because they're demanding to be remote workers. So that could be definitely a threat. So again, part of strategy formulation is looking at the SWOT, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the assignment you're going to work on this week for chapter two, it relates exactly to this. So that's really an important part of it. And again, the rest of the chapter does kind of talk about the other aspect, which is strategy implementation. So what HR practices do we utilize to really, help our recruitment and our training, our labor relations, our incentives, benefits, things along those lines? What practices do we involve ourselves in? Now, again, the book is kind of intentionally broad in this context, and they did that intentionally because, again, as we get further along and we talk, in weeks, 3 through 7, when we look at each one of the functional areas of HR, we're really going to focus on this aspect. So, again, you don't have to so much worry about what goes into each one of those things like, training and development and performance management, because we're going to get to those topics. But again, I want you to start thinking, and what chapter two is hoping you'll take away is what capabilities do we have? What skills or abilities and knowledge do we contain? What type of productivity do we have? Do we have things like absenteeism and employee turnover that's hurting us to being able to practice that? So, and then finally, how do we evaluate those processes? Who decides, how we're going to recruit, how how much we're going to pay. Obviously HR, we're kind of known as a department that does all this, but we seek impact from advice and and information from our IT department, from our finance and accounting, from marketing. So all these different functions work together to make it work. So again, strategic management is a big focus of this chapter, and I think what I like about this chapter is it will continue on. Everything that you've read in chapter 2 will continue to come up over and over again as we go along. So very, very important chapter. So thanks everybody, I appreciate it, and I'll see you for chapter 3.